Welcome everyone to this future-proof container terminal episode. Today we got a really interesting guest, Kevin Martin, and I will define why. Why interesting is not only due to his background, but also due to his experiences. And these days that we are hearing more and more about digital transformation, digital ports, companies looking to invest into different level of automation. It will be great to hear Kevin thoughts around this Digital Port Manifesto and how we can deploy those in our site. So with that being said, Kevin, welcome to the virtual stage.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. I'm really delighted to be here.
Great, Kevin. So the plan for today is that we have been putting some interesting questions and topics around hot topics out there, and just feel free to share your thoughts, lesson learns, and best practices out there. So Kevin, before starting the session, for those who haven't got the chance to meet you yet, could you share a little bit more about who is Kevin?
Yeah, of course. So I have been in the port industry almost my whole life. Started working in a port when I left school at 17 years old. And have been involved in the industry in one shape or form for the last 30 years, with a couple of periods outside the industry. So predominantly, not just container terminals. I know this is focused on it's future-proof container terminals. But the terminals I've experienced have been, although they've been container terminals, they've also been bulk and ro-ro and general cargo terminals as well. Predominantly involved in TOS implementations, but also implementations of all sorts of different solutions to tackle business challenges. Things like VTS solutions. I've been involved in finance and invoicing solutions, CRM solutions. Most things that a business encounters, I've been involved at some point. And also when I stepped out on 2 occasions, I've kind of stepped out of the industry. I think that's been a really valuable experience, coming away from the industry, seeing how other businesses work, seeing the commonalities and seeing the differences as well. So one opportunity I had was out in utilities industry, looking predominantly at the water and retail water in the UK here. And at the moment, I'm in supply chain. So I'm working on a carve out of a part of a manufacturing business. So looking at full technical migration from the old owner's network into the network of the new business, and replacement of ERP systems, full integration with the new application landscape and the new owner. So some really interesting challenges. The most interesting thing is that, it's all relevant. It might be outside the industry, but the principles are the same. And I guess that's part of some of the things we're going to talk about today, is that although ports can be unique, when it comes to digitalization, a lot of the challenges are the same wherever you go.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. And, it's I really like to explain that especially terminals are like a little piece of the whole chain. And it's quite interesting how you have been involved in many of those pieces of change, so to say.
Yeah.
But Kevin, I always like to ask this question, and I will just ask you right away. So how would you define container terminals in one word?
So I thought a lot about this. I think there's the obvious go-tos: complex, complicated, challenging, interesting. All these words. I think I've probably heard at some point in some of your previous shows. I think for me, the word that sums up container terminals and ports in general is opportunity. They're at the start of a really interesting journey. When we look at the landscape, I think a lot of businesses across the industry, some are more advanced than others, for sure. but I think there's a long way to go. I don't think anyone's got it right yet, if I'm being honest. And when you see the kind of aspirations that people have, what I do tend to see, I've been lucky enough over the last few years to engage with lots of terminals all over the world. I think the main kind of challenge I see is that they're all focused on the future stuff without necessarily getting the foundations right now, And I think that kind of hinders the industry a little bit as well, because the people that are potentially, or the organisations that are potentially providing the future solutions, they've no real incentive to develop those solutions into the kind of modern architecture that we need that really takes the industry forward. There's no real driver at the moment. I think that comes from the fact that the industry is it's long cycles. We're used to having long investment cycles for physical equipment, and those investment cycles get applied to digital solutions as well. But the pace of change in digital is far different, and I think businesses need to get comfortable with accelerating that. So huge opportunity for terminals to really harness the power of digitalization. Huge opportunity for people like you and me to support that, and really, help them along with that journey. So that's the big word for me, opportunity.
I really like you mentioned opportunity, but I may say people in our industry need to master the art of transforming challenges into opportunities and identifying low-hanging fruits within those opportunities, and then
Absolutely.
Presenting like a step-by-step plan on how they will reach short, mid, and long-term plans. I think that's the key in our industry these days, and technology obviously got a really big impact in those plans, so to say.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree with that. 100%.
And then, Kevin, jumping into our topic for today, I know you're a part of this Smart Port Alliance, and I was, as I told you, really interested in this Digital Ports Manifesto. And I will start asking here, why do we need this manifesto out there?
Yeah, it's a good question, so I guess the catalyst for the manifesto was that I'd been out of the industry for about 2 years, and I came back in and I learned about the whole smart ports conversation, and what I felt was that conversation focused very heavily on specific technologies. So there's a big 5 or 7 or 9, depending on whose website you're reading, but artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, 5G, digital twins, these are terms that get thrown around. And if you focus the conversation on that, I don't think the industry is mature enough to be using any of these concepts. And even the organizations that are, you're talking about expensive concepts, expensive things to put in place. And so what I wanted to do was open that term up. I think there was a kind of level of skepticism in a lot of organizations about smart ports. Is it just a marketing term? And what I wanted to do was kind of reclaim that term and make it accessible to anyone, that anyone can be a smart port. And how does anyone be a smart port? Well, you can be. It doesn't cost anything really to put in place changes in culture, and how you approach, and that was why I thought the manifesto could be of value. And the inspiration for the manifesto, if you take a look at the software industry, you have the Agile Manifesto. And after the Agile Manifesto came out, that transformed the software industry back in the 90s, and actually early 2000s. And because it gave a set of values and principles that everybody could work to, it was something that was at the core of what everyone was trying to achieve. And I thought, if I can make this term accessible to every port, every port can get involved in this. Everybody can be working towards, they still have their own goals, but everybody is basing what they're working towards on the same kind of aspirations and the same values and principles, as I said. So that was basically the foundation for it, was to make it accessible, but also to put in place those kind of, the culture and the capabilities in the business that are needed to achieve digital transformation. And I hesitate to use the word transformation as well, because I think that does fall into a buzzword sort of bracket, and I'm not necessarily convinced that the industry will transform. I think it's just digitalization. There's only a few industries where you can transform by moving to a completely digital model. But we're still, the maritime industry, the ports industry, container terminals, still relies on big physical heavy machinery, and that's not going to go away. We're still transporting things over tremendously large distances. That's not going away. But it's the processes and how the information flows and how people interact with that can change. And that's just digitalization at its heart. It's not full-blown transformation. So there's also a lot of kind of clearing up the misunderstandings of the terms that are in there and taking some of that language back and making it more understandable to the layman as well. Getting everybody on a common page, understanding what the terms mean and what it is that they're trying to achieve. So that was the purpose of the manifesto, was to kind of take it back and provide a base that everyone could work from.
Really interesting. And when I read the whole manifesto, what it really, pop up in my mind is technology is really cool. Technology is evolving, but especially in our industry, it's not only about technology. It's also about the people and skills required for deploying this type of technologies, and also a lot of processes. So my next question will be how this manifesto is aligning, people, process, and technology.
Yeah, that's the people, process, technology question. I always think that that term is laid out in that order, because that's the order of importance that you should apply when you're looking at digitalization or transformation. By far the most complex part of any digitalization project is the people, because they're the most unpredictable. Everyone is different. Everyone has different experiences, levels of capability, competencies, and you have to factor that in. And then you can look at the processes. And the key thing to remember is, when you're going through digitalization, processes can change, and in fact are most likely to change. But then that reflects back into the people and how you manage that, because people don't like, well, it's not true that people don't like change. People are okay with change. People don't like not knowing what's on the other side of change. And that's the kind of uncomfortable bit about it. So you have to be confident in managing people through that change, making it clear to them what the future is going to look like. And then kind of managing that and getting their buy-in, getting them invested in it. That kind of has to come down from the top. That needs to be a top-down message, because if the senior management isn't invested in that, then the people at the lower level that are affecting that change, that are, doing the day-to-day work, aren't going to buy into it either. So those are the key things for me. And then the technology is the most predictable, because systems that do what systems are designed to do, they might be bad at it, but that's a known quantity. You can see what a system does. You can assess that. If you've made a bad decision about technology, that again is down to people. So that's about the only known in that area. So yeah, so the manifesto is very much geared towards focusing on those two key aspects, and the kind of technology will follow. And I think that's where the value comes from, the manifesto in introducing that mindset.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I really like you mentioned this change management topic, because it's not only for the manifesto but for any type of technologies. These days there are many terminals out there deploying process automation or even different level of equipment automation, and definitely there is a change in the way of working. And if there is no proper management in place, then it's really tricky to make it work, actually.
Exactly. I was thinking to myself, I actually got really interested in psychology, in the psychology of people, purely because when I was going through projects in the past, if someone did something, or even if it was a kind of a looking at a system, analyzing an issue with a system, to understand what was going on, I wanted to understand why someone did something. So I got really interested in the psychology of people. And I did kind of have a thought to myself that to be a good project manager, you almost need to be part psychologist as well, because you're trying to understand these people and you're trying to take them along, and you need to understand how to almost manipulate different types of people through the process and understand what their drivers are and what their fears are, and help them through that. So there's a huge psychological aspect to change that people don't really appreciate, and that can be the key difference between the success and failure of a project, in my opinion. So you really do need, when you're going through these projects, you need those kind of people skills to kind of get it through.
Yeah, fully agree. And then, well, until now we had been only discussing around technology, but the reality is that these days we need to match that technology or align those technology with, so to say, we are reshaping our way of doing business, and we need to become more sustainable, shifting more and more into green solutions. And then my next question will be how this manifesto aligns with sustainability goals.
Yeah. So it's interesting what you said there about you've kind of equated sustainability with green solutions there as well, and green is 100% a part of sustainability. But when I talk about sustainability, and in the manifesto, I talk about sustainability, I look at three different pillars, because the business has to be sustainable, and the business is built on three pillars, which is people, planet, and profit. You need the business is a social group, and the only differentiation between a business and any other social group is it has to have customers. So that's a key part of it. And profit, obviously, you need to make money to survive. Those are the kind of three, and then, as you rightly say, then you have to think about, when you're doing that business, how you impact on the environment around you, because that's all our responsibility now. So when I was looking at sustainability, I looked at those three pillars, but I also looked at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and I identified 10 of those goals that fit into the three key pillars. So it's, for me, the environment is an important part of it, but it's also about other things like upskilling your people, and then you're contributing back into the community. You're elevating everyone, and by doing that, then you're driving towards all these collective goals, and making the world a better place to live, but also giving everyone better skills, which leads to more reward, which leads to a better quality of life for them. So it kind of, there's an elevation right across the piece. So that's kind of the way I look at it in the manifesto.
Yeah, quite interesting. And then Kevin, probably the audience is like, yeah, like really cool, all this manifesto, but then when it comes to implementing actually this manifesto, what do you consider are the critical aspects, to deploy this
Yeah. In terms of implementing the manifesto or implementing technology?
Well, it will be interesting to hear both.
Okay. So implementing the manifesto, that is a real challenge. That is a people challenge. That is a complete change of business culture. And it could be quite disruptive for a business, and it takes time for these to happen. If I think about things like the word innovation, for example, everybody talks about innovation and innovation in ports and innovation in maritime and all that kind of stuff. Innovation needs that kind of culture as well. Innovation isn't just building something because building something that there's already an existing product in the market and you just can't make it fit your business, so you build your own. That's not innovation. Innovation is implementing new ideas. It takes years to get those things in place. And to do that, you have to completely change the culture. And again, it needs to be driven from the top down. We need leadership to be saying, you know what, we want to harness the power of these tools, but in order to harness the power of these tools, we need to recognize that we need to completely rethink the operating model of the business and how we engage people in the business to get their buy-in to make this happen. So there's a lot of communication involved, and it's not just ports or terminals. It's this is every business where communication coming down the way is not commonly it's not a clear channel. But if you have everybody behind that, kind of understanding what the strategic goals are, what the drivers for the business are, what their part in it is, and how they can contribute to that. That is that's how you get the kind of implementing those values and principles of the manifesto that then leads to that kind of successful technology delivery. And then the second part of that question, the technology delivery, you need good people that are experienced in getting these things in. And that can be quite a tricky role in itself, because like I said to you before, you're almost needing someone that's part psychologist, but understands the risks and the challenge of these things. Someone that keeps a cool head when all around them are losing theirs. And I think I said that on a post that you put up on LinkedIn not that long ago. And then, keeping that kind of focus on the goal, limiting that scope creep. Projects are full of unknowns that create additional risk as well. So, and I think there is a kind of a broader lack of these kind of skills in the industry. I think organizations still outsource a lot of this stuff to the suppliers. We're going to bring in a new TOS, but we're going to let the supplier manage the implementation of it. But that supplier's only managing one small piece of what you're bringing into your technology stack. And it's not their responsibility to be talking with the other suppliers and making sure that you've got a coherent stack that works together. That's the organization's responsibility. So you need that kind of skill that's going to land these products successfully in your business, that understands the broader context of your business. But also you need that kind of broader context of what it is that you're trying to achieve from an architecture point of view, which is what most organizations are missing. Everybody's really keen to get going. Everybody's keen to get underway with transformation, but nobody actually takes a step back and looks at that and says, well, where are we now and where do we want to get to? What does the end result look like? And then working out how we get there. And I've seen that in so many organizations. And inevitably what happens is that the jump in and the start on it, and they end up with at the end of it, some kind of Frankenstein's monster of solutions that maybe don't talk to one another, or but do it really badly, and manual intervention, people moving information from one system to another is really inefficient. It's error prone, and inevitably they end up spending more money fixing all the problems that have been created than they would have spent if they just took the time at the start and invested that time in actually planning it properly. That's the biggest challenge I see, and not just in ports, but in some of the other businesses outside of the ports that I've been involved in as well, outside of the industry.
Yeah, you mentioned a really interesting topic here, and based on my previous experiences, it's not only having this like clever mind that will structure, as you mentioned, the whole architecture, but it's also about building the right team, putting together the SMEs, understanding the way of working, mapping current processes, then evaluating how technology will change that way of working and how the process will look like.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the big challenges is IT as a kind of management discipline is still quite immature, not just in this industry, but across every industry. It still doesn't necessarily have the right place in there's very few organizations with representation in the C-suite. And the infrastructure to most organizations, not everyone, I'm sure there are plenty that do have this, and I've been fortunate enough to work in some of them that do have this, is that kind of structure within the organization. The traditional IT delivery or IT operating model is very much geared towards putting in the physical infrastructure, the networks and servers and switches, and supplying the PCs and laptops and the kind of standard software. When it comes to digitalization and using systems to build in efficiency into your business and increase productivity and reduced costs and all the kind of the benefits that you can get from digitalization, you need to transform your operating model, and you need people in your IT department who understand the business at quite a deep level, and turn your IT department into that kind of trusted advisor or strategic partner, working with the business to understand what it is they're trying to achieve, and suggesting solutions to achieve that, rather than the business coming to the IT department and saying, I need a thing, let's just buy it. Because that's how you end up with that Frankenstein's monster that I talked about a few minutes ago. The thing is that most people are consumers of technology. They're not creators of technology, and they're certainly not creators of building extensive integrated technology architecture. Installing an app on an iPhone or installing a bit of software, following a wizard to install some software on your PC does not make you digitally literate. These things have been made really simple for you to get using a piece of software as quick as possible. It's a completely different skill. And even within the IT world, that kind of physical infrastructure and delivering that is completely different to the kind of things that are needed to implement these systems. So that's a real challenge for the industry, and for most businesses, not just in the ports environment.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned this topic, it reminds me, like, really there is no like a like a copy paste here, because the way you do business is probably not the same as your competitor do business. So, and on top of that, there are a lot of local deviations according to the region, legislation and many other aspects. So it's a really interesting topic.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's why it's important to do that kind of analysis piece at the start, because you might well have done it somewhere else and done it quite successfully. That doesn't mean that you're going to do it successfully in this occasion, and that's a mindset. It's that I was actually looking at this morning. The difference between complicated and complex, when you're looking at it, getting into that complexity mindset and understanding that there are so many kind of unknowns in a complex scenario, and ports are complex scenarios, and it's reacting with generally a degree of common sense and experience to the different things that arise, and understanding what your options are and choosing the best option. But there's no one size fits all for the port industry, that's for sure. So it's about becoming comfortable with these kind of different behaviours that no one's had to demonstrate before in the port industry.
Great, Kevin. So I will not do any more spoilers about the manifesto. And I would like to wrap up the session asking you what what is your advice for our colleagues worldwide looking to deploy, new type of technologies and get out the most out of it?
Yeah, I think for me, this is definitely this is the time to start giving the technology guys a seat at the table. If you're serious about digitalization, if you're serious about transforming the way that your business operates, how it integrates with customers, if you're serious about achieving these sustainability metrics and using new technologies to do that, you need to bring these people in and integrate them into the business, and have them as that kind of trusted partner. And I'm not saying they're perfect, stereotypes probably apply. I've generally found that the technology guys don't always consider the business context, but likewise, the business don't always give technology the right amount of consideration. So it's really about kind of bridging that gap, and developing that conversation between the two, and really understanding where the opportunities lie, I guess. So yeah, if I was that would be my advice, is to bring them in and consider the technology at a much earlier point in the process, but also considering the impact that has, and taking that change management piece seriously as well.
Yeah, great advice, and especially the change management topic is, let me say, you cannot actually. That will be really like the difference between success and failure. And
100% agree with you. It's people that make the project a success, and that's the key part of it.
Great. So Kevin, I think that's all for today, and I really appreciate you got the chance to join the session. And as I told you, you're always welcome to join a future episode of the podcast.
Oh, thanks very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
Okay, take care.